What is more absurd, embracing 5,625 of these for one of those, or continuing down the path that we're on right now? I think I'll take the former rather than the latter. Let me explain why as we explore. Yeah, this is a title that will get your attention. It is not clickbait because I'm going to tell you and explain to you exactly what this $5,625 an ounce silver is all about. It's a thought exercise, and when you think about the way we're going right now, it will make perfect sense to you. This video was inspired by Paul Sargent, and I love members of this community who take the time to think about things in a different way. We must think outside of the box. And of course, we've heard the phrase about thinking in terms of ounces rather than dollars in terms of the value of our silver and gold. And that's really what it's about. And we're going to talk about gold in this video too. But Paul Sargent made a brilliant comment talking about what is the world debt and calculated it and came up with some interesting numbers. And I took it a little bit further. He talked about gold and I'm talking about silver here, but we're going to talk about gold as well. Because in the end, what I'm going to let you know about in the end, it really comes full circle when you think about it. Let's get this filthy fiat out of the way. Because we're going to talk about silver. We're going to talk about what's happening here and how we can get to this price. It's kind of crazy when you think about it, but it's not anywhere near that now. In fact, it's still hovering in the low 30s right now, silver is. And so it does not mean that silver is going to be $5,625 an ounce at all, unless something big happens, and that is what I'm going to be talking about later in the video too. But until such a time as that, well, next time you're shopping for silver, consider Summit Metals. They are the channel sponsor, but there's more and more folks that are telling me that they do have the lowest price many times. Not all the time, they're going to have the lowest price. And great customer service as well. They're a phone call away to answer any questions you have, and even though they're growing dramatically. And so check them out at summitmetals.com. Now let's discuss exactly what the rate we're continuing to go on down right now. There is a bill that is happening that is being considered right now in the Congress from Republicans that will increase spending. Yes, indeed. After all this Doge stuff and everything else, they're going to increase spending and add to the deficit. It's insanity, honestly. Maybe there's something I'm not thinking about here or considering, but I just can't make sense of it. But that is what Republicans have been doing for a long time. They keep on increasing spending. And Democrats, we know, do it as well. But it's a big problem. We need to cut spending. Therefore, we're adding more to our national debt. But it's not just the national debt that's a problem. This is a global problem. In fact, when you think about, 36, almost $37 trillion in debt, and not include the unfunded liabilities in this country, it's well over $100 trillion. But let's not stop there. Let's look at what the debt is for the entire world. That's right. The most recent estimate from 2024 indicates the global debt is approximately $315 trillion and includes debts from governments, businesses, and households worldwide. Now, make no mistake, it's not just governments that do create debt and cause problems in that regard. Businesses do it and households do it. But they can only get away with it for so long. Governments can get away with it until they reset. And that's kind of what this video is about. What would a reset look like? What would a revaluation look like? Well, usually revaluations go back to the mean or to what the true value of something is, which is why I always say it's good to value our wealth in ounces rather than dollars. These dollars. So you can throw any number out there for silver, and that's the market value based off of the market. But how old is the market? How influential is the market? Well, it's very influential. It's not very old, though, compared to the grand scheme of history. And that is something that I think a lot of people have to put in perspective, which is why it's good to have wealth outside of the system. which is why I'm proud to hold silver. And even though I'm not buying as much of it as I had in the past, I believe in it and I'm going to hold on to it for that reason alone. And so when you think about that and measure it against what there is for silver, I think it gives you an idea how much silver there is above ground. Well, I asked Grok this, and I come to a little different conclusion than what Paul Sargent has, who also asked artificial intelligence. But nonetheless, estimates of above ground silver vary. But according to the U.S. Geological Survey and other industry sources, there's about 1.74 million metric tons of silver out there. That's about 56 billion ounces. That's a lot. That's to give it in perspective. A billion is 56 plus 9 zeros after it. 315 trillion is for that amount of debt, global debt. That is 315 with 12 zeros, 4 sets of 3 zeros after it. And so when we think about that, all of the available, or all of the silver that's been mined, most of it has been mined that has been lost to industrial use, corrosion, or landfills, with estimates suggesting that 7 to 10% is unrecoverable, at least by latest technology. Silver never goes away, by the way. It never fully disappears. It's just a redistribution of the atoms. Identifiable above-ground stocks like bullion, coins, and jewelry are lower. The Silver Institute's reported that there's about 2.55 billion ounces of identifiable stocks and through the above-ground stock silver, including jewelry and industrial products. And so when you think about that and look about bullion investment, there's only between 2 to 4 billion ounces of that in forms of bullions, coins, and bars, with private investors holding roughly 2 billion of those. That is the bullion that you see here. So a lot less that is held in our hands because we don't make up the vast majority of what moves the silver price. Nonetheless, these figures are rough. There's a lot of incomplete data, but nonetheless, that is pretty amazing to think about that in terms of how much silver is out there. So when you take and you divide the amount of debt by the number of ounces that have been mined since the beginning of mining, essentially the above-ground stocks of silver, that gives you $5,625 an ounce. What does that tell us? What is the lesson we can learn from this? The lesson we can learn from this is that is essentially what silver should be valued based off of the rarity of it compared to the amount of dollars that make up global debt. So that means that we are very much off kilter in terms of what the value of something should be, something that's an asset rather than a liability. There's no question. There's a reason why commodities are called assets. And silver indeed is an asset. This is not debt-based. This is debt-based. It says it right there. And even though I do believe the dollar is money because it's a store of value, though a declining store of value, it is bad money because it essentially eats itself up by every time it's produced and sent into those liabilities and those derivatives. Derivatives are essentially debt instruments, and the dollar is a debt instrument. Bad money versus good money. Unsound money versus sound money. And that's what we have with silver. And it's remarkable to think about it. Now, this essentially is what could happen during a reset. If we were to reset everything and cancel out that debt completely, silver, in theory, could be valued to up to as much as $5,625 an ounce. Of course, that would not be the actual way you would measure because the dollar would be reformed. Of course, the dollar being the dominant currency around the world, it would also have to be measured with other currencies as well too. The euro, the yen, the renminbi, all the 6 major ones that make up the IMF's breadbasket of currencies. But the dollar is the strongest of those when measured. And so, therefore, we're being overly general here, but nonetheless, above $5,000 an ounce, But of course, that means the value by the market for these items here for silver would be a lot more than it is now. Let's just put it to you that way, whether it's measured in dollars or not. So that is essentially what a reset would equate to. Now, I'm going to blow your mind with this, because this is the impetus of what has inspired me to do this video. Paul Sargent ran his analysis and came up with the same figures, $350 million per ounce for, or $350 trillion for the global debt, but came up with, for gold, when you run the same numbers for gold, it's a lot different. It's in terms of how much it would be. Gold would be measured at 7.2 billion ounces. That's the amount of gold that has been mined in history. It's a lot of the same metrics and the like, but so that's a pretty big amount. And the number that I get when I do my math on it is $43,750 for one of these, for gold. That's right. So gold is another metal that indeed is very rare. And so when you think about it, $43,750 for an ounce of gold is something. That is looking at where it is now for, it's essentially $3,200 right now. Man, can you imagine? $43,000 an ounce. Man, crazy. $43,750 an ounce. So that is what gold would be revalued at. Well, here's the real kicker here, folks, is that when you take those two numbers and calculate the ratio between them, guess what it is? 8-to-1. That's right. It is the mining ratio. By looking and revaluing gold and silver based off of the global debt, you come up with 8-to-1, which is the mining ratio. And this is why this analysis in this market where we're sitting at right now is unrealistic, but just goes to show you how twisted and bastardized the whole debt-based fiat system that we find ourselves a part of is. And essentially, it is, for all practical purposes, in a sense, a Ponzi scheme that's been codified by governments around the world. Hence why there's this debt. So let that sink in a little bit. And it just goes to show you that the gold and silver that you own are worth a whole lot more than they say it is. No question about that. It's going to take a massive shift in order to be revalued to something even greater than where it is. Even the most hopeful among us can only even hope for that in the case of a revaluation of any sort, they're going to want to be able to have, even if they base it off of gold and silver, they want the instruments that from which they are backed to be more powerful than the backing itself. So they're obviously not going to revalue it based off of those numbers. Not anywhere close. If they were even to double, I'd be shocked and surprised. But nonetheless, they are what they are. We live in a reality of what we're dealing with right now in terms of the entire system from which we find ourselves apart, and whatever the system is going to be, if there is a reset of any sort. But this is why notions like NESARA and GUSARA will never really happen, because they're not going to give that much power to the metals, and that therefore empowering you. But make no mistake, if you hold gold and silver, you're your own central bank, and you're your own way to be able to have some wealth outside of the system, and that's what it's all about. Let me know what your thoughts are about this video, and I want to thank Paul Sargent again for the inspiration for this. And I'd like to extend a multitude of gratitude to each and every one of you for taking the time to watch, and encourage you to please rate, share, comment, and subscribe.